Okay, so we are live. So welcome back to Foresight Paradigm, and we're having a video here, kind of an open discussion, kind of discussing whatever we want to talk about going on in the world, kind of marking my 100 subscriber mark, and it's not like an extremely high number, but for a small YouTuber that just started in quarantine a couple months ago, basically, it's you go on the Reddit sites, for small YouTubers, it's a pretty big deal for a lot of people. So anyway, how's everybody doing?
Pretty good.
Great.
Awesome. So, what do you guys want to open with? I guess the elephant in the room is the election.
Yeah.
Might as well start there. Uh, Jaydon here is a big Star Trek guy, and so am I, and I imagine a couple other people here are too. So we might get into that a bit. But what are you guys' thoughts on the election?
It's not over yet.
Right? It's not.
Biden the victory.
Yeah, looks like Biden's gonna win, no doubt.
I'm no expert in polling, and I'm definitely not an election official. But at this point, I mean, I said the other day to some people, when the AP actually called Michigan and Wisconsin, when they said like, "Oh yeah, no, it's blue," I stood up and I just went, "Guys, I'm gonna say it. He's got it." I mean, at this point, when those states definitely went to him, I mean, we need any state at this point. It doesn't matter which one decides to vote for him, but if he is so close that any of the states that are left, I mean, I guess except for Alaska, I don't know why they haven't called that already, but
because they've only counted 50% of their vote.
Yeah, but it's going for Trump. I mean, but
Alaska, and has only got 3 electoral votes.
Yeah.
Alaska is Alaska.
It's a red state.
So it's a red state.
Well, Chris, maybe you can explain to me why are they taking so long to count these votes? Because
okay, here's the deal. I can explain the deal. Pennsylvania, of course, was the red mirage of Trump getting all the election day votes. It was the order in which the different states counted, whether they counted the election day votes first or whether they counted the mail-in votes first. If they counted the mail-in votes first, it first had a lead, then the lead. If they counted up, Pennsylvania is a state that the election day votes, so looked like Trump had like a 10-point lead. Okay, the red, and as much as the media, like MS, and everybody prepared everybody for that. Everybody was like, "Oh, Trump's got a 10-point lead in Pennsylvania." Okay, that of course evaporated as soon as they started counting mail-in votes. Now Biden is up by, I believe, about 30,000 votes. He's overwhelmingly winning the mail-in votes. So that's good. What comes after that is the large amount of provisional votes. Okay, so those are people that might have had like got a mail-in ballot but decided not to mail it and to show up on election day, but they didn't bring the mail-in vote with them. Or what the networks are overcautiously waiting for is to get a gauge of what percentage Trump gets of those provisional votes. It's not, everybody knows it's not going to be enough to wipe out Biden's lead from the mail-in votes, but they're just being overcautious and waiting because the provisional ones are the last to be counted. So that's what the holdup is.
That was one thing I was saying with a friend of mine. He said, none of these sites right now want to call it too soon, because everybody is just so on edge. I mean, you're seeing literally people with guns standing outside these centers as they're counting. I mean, and so I get that everybody just wants to say, look, we will take the extra day, we will take the extra time, we will double, triple check everything. I get it. It's frustrating, especially when some of these states, weeks ago, literally tried to make this easier.
Yeah.
They said, hey, look, we know what the law says, that we're not allowed to count these till like election night, but we do currently already have 3 times as many as we've ever had before. Can't we change the law to start early? And they were denied that.
Well,
They
the
were
Republican
denied that.
legislatures did that so that Trump could cause the havoc that he's causing and give him the chance to send Rudy in and, you know, after his wonderful Borat appearance and go.
He's tucking in his shirt. He's tucking in his shirt.
Tucking in his shirt. Who knows what he's going to do in Pennsylvania, but in Borat, he was tucking in his shirt. So anyway, it was designed. I mean, it was, you know, to make it so that there would be this period of days where Trump's big lead in certain states dwindled. Now, it happened faster in other states. Like Michigan tried to do it, but they got their votes counted relatively quickly. Pennsylvania is the state, of course, that didn't happen yet. And this was by design by the Republican legislature to give Trump that opportunity to do exactly what he's doing now. To sow doubt about the results and how did he go from having a 10-point lead to, you know, Biden winning, it's fraud, it's whatever. And then their big press conference today, the Republicans, is going to be at some garden center in Pennsylvania. That's supposed to, it's happening at like 11:30. Who knows what's going to be announced at that?
But Chris, I mean, a lot of states had like mail-in ballots, you know, that they had to count, you know, that came in. Is it just that Pennsylvania couldn't start counting those until election day? That's why they're still.
That was the issue. They had asked the legislature to pass legislation so that they would have been able to do it like Florida does and be able to have a count early and then have a count on election night. But the Republican legislature said, no, they can't be counted until after election day.
So I don't imagine that anybody here buys Trump's fraud claims, right? Yeah.
I haven't for 4 years. I don't know why I'd start now.
Yeah. I mean, it's so absurd.
His administration or, you know, I mean, and several prominent Republicans have come out and said he just needs to stop, you know. Well, those Republicans are probably just trying to save their own butts to distance themselves from him now, even though they've been, you know, coddling him for 4 years, 3.5 years.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I mean, I have no idea if they're going to stand by him or not. If this all shakes out, you think, like, but enough prominent ones that it's actually going to be a fight on January 20th?
No, I'm expecting that, you know.
I hope he walks out on his own, but I'm not.
Somehow between now and January 20th, you know, I don't know, drug him or something. I don't know.
That's what it's the first time in my life. I don't know about anybody
start
else.
putting Xanax in his Wheaties. I don't know.
His Big Macs.
Jaydon, what are your thoughts about all this? Can you hear me?
Well, like, due to my job, I can't really say much. So I will say that I think that it's very apparent on a lot of things. And hopefully this is over by like Monday.
Yeah. One thing that I found fascinating is, you know, is the red-blue dichotomy that corresponds to city and country. So like you go to the north, you go to the south, it doesn't matter where you go. You know, they put up the map of a state and the counties in the state, and around every city is blue. It doesn't matter where it is. And out in the country, it's red, right? So, I mean, I think what that is, you know, obviously has to be just the fact that people in the city, they're exposed to more people, likely have more education. And I think stats back that up too. And people obviously out in the country are isolated and their little worlds. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Like,
I think it's a combination of what cities would have would be more well-educated people and also more minorities.
Mhm.
They have both demographics that would be blue.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of people out in more rural spaces that, you know, honestly have just been doing what their parents did or their grandparents did or their great grandparents, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, I understand completely the, you know, waking up one day and looking around and just basically being like, I have no idea what all of this is. This is confusing to me. The world outside is different, and people are thinking things that I have never thought before in my life. You know, I understand that rejection of that kind of change, especially when it's so fundamental to who you are and what you've been doing. I think the issue is that, yeah, kind of what you said is in that moment when you're presented with that, you have the option to go back inside the bubble and isolate and not engage at all, or you can engage. And if you engage, more often than not, yeah, you become more liberal, at the very least, with just not caring about a lot of things that people seem to care about for some reason.
Well, it's like, you know, the Republicans have this thing about, you know, all the liberal colleges and universities are brainwashing people. It's like, you know, grew up in rural, whatever, place where I'm going to, in rural area where they're isolated and go away and get exposed to kids. And, you know, to the Republicans, oh, that bias in universities, no, it's just the people being exposed to new ideas for the first time, and that maybe like, well, parents always voted Republican, and they go to college and they, you know, are exposed to ideas and they like rethink that, like, no, I'm not like my parents.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that really drives me crazy is this whole notion of forced patriotism that you hear, you know, coming from conservative circles. Like, the thing that makes America great, to the extent that it is the fact that you can speak against it. You know, that we have that freedom. Like, we're not North Korea, and people don't seem to get that. They're so outraged, you know, that, you know, sports players want to take a knee for injustice and stuff like that. It's insane to me how people do not get that. That's the thing that makes America great, again, such as it might be. What are your thoughts on that? This whole idea of forced patriotism that we see everywhere. Like, why do they not get that? It's almost like a religious thing, because I mean, even the way they teach the pledge, you know, it's like a religious ritual. You know, it's God and country, and no.
And there is an element of religiosity in that forced patriotism, but it is something I think is uniquely American as well. There's just this deep, weird love for the country in a manner that I don't understand. I love this country. I love America. Like, I have done fantastic long lineages in my family's genealogy, and we have a lot of information on this. We've been in this country for a really long time, and I love this place. I love America. But the reason that I love America is exactly what you said. The fact that I can sit down and disagree with people about this country and the direction that it's going.
But this is, I think it's the word nationalism, which of course is one of the, you know, signs of leading towards fascism, is this hardcore nationalism. And I think is what you're talking about. It's not just it's beyond patriotism. It's nationalism.
I think it's kind of like the steps would be like patriotism, forced patriotism, nationalism, fascism.
Right.
Yeah, right. And that yeah, that's where I get concerned is when people wake up and just love this country for no reason and aren't being assholes about it. I love those people, because we can sit down, we can watch the Olympics together, and we can go, woohoo, look at us throwing that disc, go America.
Right, but everybody has like pride in their own nation.
Exactly. When you're
that's normal. That's normal patriot. That's what you would
right. when you take
into this, and a lot of the catchphrase of the last elections or 2 elections or whatever it was with the American exceptionalism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that is, and of course that when what's his name, Alexa Tocqueville used that phrase, he was actually insulting America. About America thinks it's so exceptional, you know. But then the Republicans turned that into a thing of this thing of American exceptionalism, and it's like, well, you know, if you go back and read where that came from, that was not a compliment.
Yeah,
Chris, what do you think about the Electoral College?
What do I think about the Electoral College?
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously there's a problem with it because of, you know, way too many times now that it's no longer a fluke for someone to win the popular vote but not win the Electoral College, which means there is a problem. Okay. I don't know if it's a problem with the allocation of seats, districting, whatever something needs to be done to remedy it. I can't see completely doing away with it and having no system and just being a flat out democracy and we would no longer be a republic. But
because you're kind of an expert on
that little bit of each, not just the individual, but the states each have a say. So I don't see it being done away with, but
right. Well, Chris, you're kind of an expert on the founders. So what is their and I've read a lot about them too, but what do you think, again, was there an intent with the Electoral College? I mean, was it kind of to give more representation to like sparsely populated areas, or what was the deal there?
I think it was the states having a say. I think it's just it's republicanism. Not with small r, republicanism. You know, I mean, it's just you know, when you vote, you're actually not voting for your candidate, you're voting for your electors.
Right.
Then those electors assemble. So you're voting for a representative, and that goes all the way back even to state governments, you know, before the, you know, separate from the federal elections. Like, well, in my new book, when I did the big study of Connecticut and what happened in Connecticut with the overthrow of the Federalist Party their elections for governor worked like that. At their Freeman's meeting, they weren't voting directly for a candidate, they were voting for their representative to represent their town at the general election. So that whole concept it was also in states. You know, so I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this topic, but I do, as just a normal thinking person, say, hey, there's problems with the Electoral College.
And our whole Constitution. I mean, again, I absolutely am no expert on this, but from everything I've ever read, our whole Constitution is a compromise amongst a bunch of jerks yelling about other jerks, talking about what to do with the jerks in their country. I mean, one of the reasons that we have electors instead of just our vote being cast is quite literally because the founding fathers did not believe in the intelligence of the common person at the time. They weren't well, true. Not all of them, but they weren't confident that we could stay away from overt populism. And they said, look, we need some more educated people to sit down and look at all these votes and go, okay, yeah, this guy's all right, you know? But I agree with Chris. It's obvious that even if Joe Biden wins the Electoral College and the popular vote, which it does look like that's where we're going, it's still too close. The popular vote is so far in his favor at this point that it's kind of ridiculous that we're waiting for these states to be called, and yet we absolutely have to. Like, there's no other decision, you know?
Right. Well, Thomas Jefferson did talk a lot about at least harboring hopes that people could become enlightened. And, he talked about if you want
Hopes.
an uneducated populace and you want freedom, you're going to want what never has been and never will be. And we're kind of seeing that, manifest in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and that, I think Trump is a really good example as to why, even with the Electoral College, it doesn't seem to work. Like, even with those educated people that are supposed to be, well knowledge on the government, they still all sat down in 2016 and went, yeah, I guess this guy.
Right.
So
he's not Hillary.
yeah, I mean, is that a good enough response, right?
Another Republican that, like, I would really fear for the country. Like, say John McCain had won. Okay,
Would be
I
fine.
wouldn't have been afraid for the country
I
if
agree.
John McCain had won. I would have disagreed with him on things. I would have whatever, but
Mitt Romney.
I wouldn't. I mean, imagine what the founders would have thought if they could have seen into the future and seen a Donald Trump being elected president.
Yeah.
When I think of Trump, what his behavior,
they were like the best and the brightest, and the disputes that they had back then over who should be president were like, I mean, Donald Trump. I mean, he would have been just so. He probably wouldn't even been allowed to vote.
George Washington wrote a small guide on how to behave in public in a courteous manner.
Oh, right.
I feel confident Donald Trump would not have passed the first test.
Trump, the great businessman, has had so many business failures and fraud claims and all over the place. I mean, he's just a big con man. He's a malignant narcissist. Anybody that praises him, he'll praise them back, and anybody that challenges him, he'll let me drop Jaydon there.
How Americans still vote for the guy?
Yeah.
I think he's some great businessman.
Well, Diogenes, Jason, so you haven't been talking, man. So what are your thoughts?
Well,
Or
I
if you have any.
posted on Twitter today that I can feel my IQ points dropping watching the news there. It's sad. Like, I was honestly hoping to see a landslide for Biden just to repudiate Trump, so publicly, but unfortunately it didn't happen. I don't know. I don't understand why so many Americans would vote for a guy who's categorically such, an overt liar and a buffoon, who's clusterfucked the entire COVID response. My wife, English is not her first language, and she asked me like 2 years ago, she goes, what does douchebag mean? Because she kept hearing it used over and over and over again in relation to Trump. So
it's a fair description.
What I understand is, like how many people did vote, even though he's going to lose, how many people did vote. Now, his approval rating, other than a brief blip where it went up to about 45% at the beginning of the pandemic, when it looked like he was going to handle it responsibly, with that quickly went away. But his approval rating is basically held at like 42% for, his before COVID, after COVID, all the way up to the election. So if only 42% approve of him, okay, but he got like 47% of the popular vote. Who are that 5% of people who are voting for someone they don't approve of?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm not as positive that they don't actually approve of him. I think there is more common knowledge in our country now on how to game polls, and people just don't care. I watch people, just outright lie to each other on nonsense all day, every day. It's like, hey man, did you take that quarter that was sitting here? No. Well, dude, I've got it on camera that you took this quarter. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Here it is. And it's like, well, thanks for giving it back, but why'd you even lie to me about it? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yes, lies when there's like no, reason you can see why you would lie about that. That's the weirdest lies. I mean, that's a compulsive liar. I think that's
so you get stopped on the street. You got groceries. You got groceries in your hand. You're walking to your car. Person comes up to you and goes, "Hey, how you gonna vote?" Just lie to them. I mean, I honestly just think that's one of the issues, is that we do just have people outright lying to these pollsters because they just don't care.
His approval rating polls that started like going back before the election season, before whatever the approval rating polls. Okay, that and it was many polls from many different sources, some by phones, anonymous, whatever. So you're not like, no reason for somebody to lie in one of those polls. If it's somebody calling you on the phone or an internet poll or something, do you approve of the president? And you click no or say no or whatever. Those kind of polls, like where his approval rating held that is steady. Although the other flip side of that, though, now that I'm just thinking of this, is his disapproval rating has always stayed at about 53%. So that would balance with the 47% voting for him exactly. So I guess there's some people who would just say they were undecided in a poll, that middle part there, that 5%.
And even though they may already have decided, even though they may actually approve of him, they just don't want to say, or blatantly choose not to, or just say undecided. I think there are people that, I mean, I know over the last 4 years, I have had a discussion with somebody where the first 30 minutes, we're on the same wavelength. We're agreeing on, yeah, man, this and that about the government or whatever. And then like 45 minutes later, a beer in, the guy just goes, yeah, and I just think Trump's doing great. And I'm like, what?
I just got a notification. BBC News has declared Biden the winner.
Whoo!
We knew it was going to happen at this point, but yeah.
No, MSNBC just called it too. I got the TV on with that sound in the background.
Oh my gosh!
Our national nightmare is over.
Oh God! I don't know. Did anybody else literally just right now feel their shoulders lighten up?
Yes.
Is that just me?
Yeah, even though we knew it was gonna happen, we knew what to do. They prepared us for months what to expect, that it was gonna be.
But Elliott, I'm worried for the future though, man.
We've got a lot of work to do.
His sons are talking about running now. I mean,
well.
All these religious nut jobs that support him, and I mean, there's a lot of them. All this is a whole culture that we have to deal with.
Well, he has lost a lot of support. Lost a lot of support among the evangelicals. But Billy Graham's granddaughter came out and supported Biden. I'm expecting Biden's gonna give a speech soon, and I'm gonna want to watch that. So I'm not gonna want to stick around.
It's cool. Gotcha. I just got word from Jaydon. He dropped because he has to get to work. But if we can briefly, I mean, even though he dropped off.
I have the TV on over there without the sound on, so I'll be able to see if anything major is happening. I will let you guys know.
Yeah, well, Jaydon was a big Trek guy. If you think about it, I mean, you might think it's silly, but how many of you guys are Star Trek fans?
Only the original series. I never got into.
Next Generation. Come on.
I just never. I was a big fan of the original. I just never got into all the.
Well,
I've been watching the new season of Discovery, and I got to say I like Michael Burnham's dreadlocks. I think she looks totally hot.
Oh yeah, man, she looks so good now. Oh my goodness, I'm like blown away by that. I'm like every night I'm watching that show. I'm like, oh my god, is this the same person? Like what? It's amazing, and the show's gotten so much better too, hasn't it? I mean,
yeah,
it's really good. But the ideas of Star Trek, unity, diversity, secularism. Being science-based, I think all of these things are, they're the cure for humanity. I mean, they're if we keep going in the right direction, that's where we're going to go. Does anybody disagree with that?
No.
Anybody think it's silly just because it's a sci-fi? I mean, it has a philosophy though. That's why so many people, love it, because it's more than that.
Well, you can learn. as Chris was saying, in the original series was so much of a social commentary on what was going on in the 60s. Like,
Yep.
you know, Kirk has the first interracial kiss with Uhura, and the guy Frank Gorshin, the half black, half white. So there was a lot of stuff that was being dealt with in the series that was sort of representative of the time. So,
and it's kept doing that.
Yeah, they've continued that trend, honestly, and I don't. It seems weird to me that we're allowed to take some fairy tales and some fantasy stories, and we're allowed to make sweeping changes in law and ourselves, but we're not allowed to take others and gain good insight from them. You know, I prefer looking at an episode of Star Trek and breaking it down and figuring out how in the heck we understand psychology or human life or other people, rather than reading the Bible or any other religious textbook. What's the difference between the two? They're both made up. I mean,
there's a great quote from Enterprise that I like. It was something about Archer's asking the alien, goes, "So why are you guys at war?" And he says, "Well, because they believe the creator created the universe in 9 days, and we believe it took 10." And he's like, "Huh? And for that, you've been killing each other for 10 years."
Yeah.
Yeah. No commentary there on anything. That's not a shot at any particular thinking.
This is a quote I love from the original series. It's from Who Mourns for Adonis. So they go down to a planet, and there's like this big, gigantic figure of Adonis, from Greek mythology. And Kirk is having a conversation with a female officer who kind of has fallen in love with the god. And so Kirk has a speech, and he's telling her, "Accept him, and you condemn all of us to slavery, nothing less than slavery. Or perhaps the thought of spending an eternity on bended knee and attending sheep appeals to you. Give me your hand. We're the same. We share the same history, the same heritage, the same lives. We're tied together beyond any untying. Man or woman, it makes no difference. We're human. We couldn't escape each other even if we wanted to. That's how you do it, Lieutenant, by remembering who and what you are. A bit of flesh and blood afloat in the universe without end. And the only thing that's truly yours is the rest of humanity. And that's where our duty lies." So I thought that was a beautiful speech of Kirk's that kind of epitomizes that humanistic core of Trek. And on Discovery, Jason, of course, we have the first gay couple. And these actors are such great people that people like certain family members of mine that say, gay people have mental disorders. I mean, it's just disgusting and so ignorant.
I remember I think it was last season, the chubby redhead, apparently like she's got like autism or something, or ADD, or like she's got some like learning disability that they comment on.
Yeah, and now they've got the first non-binary and transgender couple on there.
You guys are gonna kill me.
2 days ago. Last night it came out. Yeah.
You guys are gonna kill me. I haven't seen any of Discovery, so I'm definitely.
I'm totally
gonna have to check. I'm definitely gonna have to check all this out. I know. I'm so sorry. I know I failed.
Especially the third season so far has been absolutely awesome.
Really good, good man. Yeah, well, I need something.
The only thing
that kind of Star Trek, I'm like trying to watch the TV with no sound.
The only thing that taints it slightly for me is I went on Twitter and I followed Sonequa Martin Green, Michael Burnham, the main character, and the first line of her profile is, "My jam is Jesus, therefore love is my game." And I'm like, oh my god,
yeah.
The lady of Star Trek. The atheist Gene Roddenberry's creation, And in the show, she's not a believer in any of that at all, but I was disappointed in that, but that's just, I guess, a pet peeve.
I heard Chris Pratt is a real Jesus lover. And I heard that, I don't know if you know this guy, but I heard that from Scott Clifton, who is he's done a lot of different soap operas, and he's a super great actor. He's also really handsome and funny, just like Chris Pratt is. And he's been a really long time atheist activist. He spoke with Shannon Q and Matt Dillahunty for like an hour and a half arguing about humanistic philosophy. Yeah. So I just honestly, in my head, I just replaced the two. All of my love and for Chris Pratt, it just went to Scott Clifton. So I'm cool with that,
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how many like atheist celebrities there are that all these fundamentalist Christians watch in their households, while they simultaneously talk about how if you're not a Christian, you can't be successful or fulfilled, and they have no idea.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Weird.
Moving on from that, the death penalty. What are your thoughts on that? Do you support it in any circumstance?
I'm pretty hardcore against it, but
I
Yeah,
think
me too.
there's some people that should be taken out of the gene pool, but I think you need to have overwhelming evidence. I mean, I don't think it's right that one innocent person should be executed, but there are some bad people that really need to be taken out.
and I understand that argument too. And I know what people like Sam Harris present is a future. But when they talk about understanding, the physiology of the brain and our psychological nature better and so forth, we will one day get to a place where we have the ability, whether it's through a nano scalpel into somebody's head or a pill that they can take, we will be able to change that physiology in their brain. We will be able to fix that. And I think it's our job in the meantime to try to do our best to get to that as quick as possible and not destroy as many people in the process. I completely understand the need to be taken out of the gene pool. It is hard to argue that argument. That's one of the best I've ever heard for it, honestly. But
I think we want to shift from the mindset of punishment, which is a very kind of religious feeling, to one of understanding. We want to get at the root and not just attack the symptom.
Yeah.
I think Bertrand Russell has a quote talking about if prisons treated their patients as they do, not patients, but their people, whatever, as hospitals do, we get a lot further. We want to understand things better than when you kill somebody. It kind of dehumanizes the people doing it and witnessing it, and you're kind of like, I don't know, you're kind of validating what you're against in a way, you know what I mean? And I don't think that's, even though I agree with Jason, you feel like naturally, of course, certain people deserve it.
Yeah.
But
what's the point of prison? Is it punishment or is it rehabilitation?
I think it should be rehabilitation.
I would agree. It should.
I mean,
we
would lock up tornadoes if we could, right? We can't, but we need to lock some people up to protect everybody else. But
someone who commits a crime and is immediately remorseful of it, what's the point of sending them to prison? They don't need to be rehabilitated. They feel bad for what they've done. They're never going to do it again. So then the only recourse up is punishment. Why send them to jail? They're not going to reoffend.
And of course, you risk wrongly killing the innocent. It's happened time and again.
True.
It's questionable as a deterrent too. Really,
we don't necessarily know one way or the other currently. But again, I mean, in future, I think it's highly possible in the future, once we get to that state where we can theoretically give somebody a pill to fix their psychopathy. Once we get to that state, we probably can put a scanner up to their head in court and just go, beep, yep, this guy seriously is remorseful and he's not going to do it again. But for the time being, again, unfortunately, we aren't at that level, and we have to have some kind of compromise to exactly what Landon said, keep people safe, but also honestly, exactly what you're saying, which is we have to, at the very least, remove the offending parties from the rest of society that can interact. There has to be a level compromise. We just haven't necessarily figured that out perfectly yet. But I think there are some obvious things that exist that we can easily say against. I mean, for-profit prisons. I live in Nashville, and Core Civic is the largest private prison entity in the country, and they're a disgusting company. And it's disgusting that you could have a for-profit prison. You're literally making money off of human beings being slaves. I mean, that's what it is. It's still legal in our Constitution to keep slaves as long as they're a bad person. But
I'm against any privatization of anything that should be a function of government, whether it be schools, prisons. We have
a lot of charter schools too, and those bug me.
That's a whole issue for another day with that. But Guys, I think I'm gonna bow out here, and
You'll watch the Biden speech.
my battery power is dwindling here, and I want to watch TV.
All right. Thanks for being on,
And
Chris.
also, that was my boss on the phone, and I need to call him back. So when the phone rang before, so I have three reasons for bowing out a little early here, but it's been interesting and fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I will see you guys soon.
Yeah.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy.
So what do you guys think about globalism?
In what way?
Like wanting to unify the world, wanting to have maybe not a world government, but something like a United Nations model, more connecting of countries and humanity, because we all are humans. We share in the human condition. We are on the same planet. Spaceship Earth flying through space. There are global problems that parochial policies are not going to do anything for. So, what are your thoughts?
We're already in a globally interconnected economy, so
Right.
You saw that.
I go back to Star Trek, the Federation,
Well, and you have to look at the EU on this, and this is one of the things I think is so interesting when we try to separate social policies and that versus economic policies. The EU did not start out as a social institution. It started out specifically through the concept of, hey, we're close enough to each other. We all have stuff we want. I'll pay you for this. You pay me for that, and that ultimately evolved into a place where just literal individual businesses and so forth in various countries would look at other countries and other businesses and say, these guys are screwing over their workers, paying them barely any money, and so they can sell their products so much cheaper than us. And so we're getting flooded out of the market. So
that's you guys have got to understand. Okay, so I've lived in Asia for almost 20 years. I've been in a number of factories in China where these guys are making maybe $10 a day. And you guys think this is bad and this is taking advantage of it. But there's hundreds of people lined up waiting for these jobs. And like these factories, like they're given, like they're living on site, so they're living in dormitories. They're food is provided. They've got accommodation. There's like hundreds of motorbikes lined up out front that these guys couldn't afford otherwise. So, while to us it might seem predatory in wages, I mean, these people are happy to get these salaries.
Well, and I wasn't speaking specifically about China or any other Asian country at the moment. I was just talking about Europe specifically, because they are in a bit of a different situation. And I agree, and they were at the time too. I agree with a lot of the things that you're saying there, in the sense that first off, when we hear $10 a day in America, we say to ourselves, "Oh, that's not enough." But in various other countries, especially if it's $10 American, there's a different rate.
You can eat for a week on $10.
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying. There's different exchange rates and so forth, and a lot of people don't take that into consideration, and they don't take into consideration the amount of labor available. Absolutely. But when you are so close together, as Europe is in this sense, where they truly are right on top of each other, and they all did have a relatively similar standard of living at the time, that ultimately was the driving force, I think, where they said, look, basically it costs the same in Italy to do stuff as it does in France to do stuff right now, and if we're going to trade between each other and actually be equal in that that trading partnership, we're going to need to make sure that people aren't undercutting their labor wages just simply to shave a few dollars off the end price when they ship it to us. But I mean,
zooming out from the minutia of it, I mean, that's where we're going to have to go. I mean, is a more globalized world period.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
that's kind of where I was going, which is the idea that if we are going to honestly be a completely interconnected globe where
we
we
are
have,
interconnected, like Jason said. I mean, it's
you're right, but on a much broader level, there's a lot of other interconnectivity that could exist for sure, and I honestly think that's great. I mean, I think the fact that the three of us can all get together here and speak about things, or with anybody else around the world at any given time, is fantastic, and the fact that we can trade ideas and make money that way, and transfer goods, all of that is fantastic. But the more that we do that, the more that we will start to recognize the same thing that the EU did, that there has to be certain things that we all agree on. We can't have one country that's trading with a democracy, with a capitalist system that's completely and totally free market, no type of government control whatsoever, which is not what America is, or really any place, but then have the other side a complete and total dictatorship where the country is essentially enslaved by the government and producing whatever the government. We can't have those complete diametrically opposed
or theocracies, like all the Islamic theocracies.
Exactly.
I was just speaking with an activist, ex-Muslim activist, Eric K, on my last interview podcast, and we're talking about the immigration thing in Europe, and these people, they have values that are completely antithetical to a secular, fair government. So yeah, you definitely have a point, Elliott, there. But I think that in the modern world, more people subscribe to fairness and equality and equal opportunity than not. I mean,
well, there's things like fair trade. I was 15 years ago, 2000, end of 2005, I think, there was the World Trade Organization had their meeting in Hong Kong, and I was living like a block or two from where the convention center was, where the police had cordoned it off, and the protesters broke through, and I saw like this, forgive me if this offends somebody, but like the long-haired left-wing type. The rioters were the
hippies, man, the damn hippies.
No, yeah, the damn hippies. Now, it was the Koreans who were rioting, the Korean rice farmers. Now, this long-haired hippie, they were thanking, like I heard the guys that kamsahamnida, thanking the Korean rioters. I'm like, what are you thanking them for? These guys are getting government subsidies. They're earning like the price of Korean rice is way over like the market price. They're paid to come here and shit disturb, and you're thanking them for coming here and causing trouble, for like this, against like this global economy. Like, well, shithead, you're already in a global economy, and you're thanking this guy for rioting against police because he's more concerned about his own fucking subsidies. And I'm like, you dipshit hippie fucker,
and that's a huge and that's obviously a huge problem, and as somebody that leans more left than I do right on most things, you still can't just tear down the whole freaking system and set it on fire because you don't like the fact that a CEO got a bonus this year. Like, I respect the fact that, hey, there are things that we need to talk about. There are discussions that need to be had when it comes to how wealth is allocated, what allocation of wealth is absurdity, how we can produce various goods, what goods are worth producing, all of that stuff. And if you're just going to come to the party and what's the analogy? You're going to play chess with a pigeon, and you make a move, and then the pigeon just jumps up on the chessboard and just shits all over it. It's like,
are you talking about Trump?
yeah, I'll take that. Yeah.
International trade and international unions are kind of indelible factors in peace, in progress, and even science. Go to the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. All these people from different countries coming together in that endeavor. It crosses boundaries. It doesn't know any boundaries. So.
And I've heard.
I wrote an article last year on being a global citizen. And I said like, hey, BBC News is who just announced the winner. So I mean, I don't watch CNBC or CNN or Fox News. I look at Al Jazeera and BBC. I get international news.
Yeah.
And BBC had done an article a couple of years ago that I linked in my article that talked about being a global citizen. And actually, Pinker, I'm reminded now, Pinker had a good quote in Enlightenment Now about, that's why people have feet. They want to go to where the opportunities are. So wouldn't it be great we could live in a world where you can go and live wherever you want? If you're an American and you want to go live in England, you can do that. If you're, French and you want to go live in South Africa, you can go. Like this whole idea of boundaries, and was it Einstein talking about, measles is like, or nationalism is like the measles of the world. And so being a global citizen, this article in BBC was talking about how it's very, you've got, you're not tied to your local community. You tend to be more free spirited. And it was interesting because like when Facebook came out, like it was 2006, it really kind of caught on. It was more like it broke out from the universities where it was kind of confined. And what really shocked me was like, all these people that I grew up with back in Canada, they're still living in the same city. I've lived and worked in 9 different countries. These people have never left our hometown. And I was shocked by that, okay, not only have I left my hometown, I've gone and lived in like 8 other countries, and you're still in exactly the same place you grew up. And I just don't get that.
Yeah. And traveling, I think Mark Twain has a quote, traveling really expands your horizons in so many ways. I've been fortunate enough. I've lived in Japan a little bit. I lived in Central America for about 3 years. So, yeah, it definitely does. Moving on, if you guys are, go ahead.
Real quick, I was just going to say on that. I mean, just what Diogenes was saying there. It does need to be more accessible. We need to. It would be a better world if it were possible for a good-hearted person, somebody that has no ill intentions, just wants to expand their horizons and go participate in another country's government and society and economy. If it's just as easy as them being able to essentially get up and do that without extreme barriers, I mean, that is a better world, 100%, I think, and that's why I hope we will be able to do that. Not to say I'm glad that all the airlines and cruise ships are losing money right now, but I am hoping that this will make it more accessible in the future. It'll be, hey man, $100, you'll be able to fly over to anywhere in Africa you want to go, man. Round trip, that type of stuff. I think that's helpful for making us all global citizens.
Yeah. Moving on to religion versus science. I've been talking a lot about religion. So I'm sure you guys know about Stephen Jay Gould's NOMA, non-overlapping magisteria, that science and religion make claims about different magisteria. Like religion is all about morals and ethics, and science is about what, the natural world. For me, that's so obviously BS. I mean, because they both make claims about the universe, about creation, about even human nature is something that's it lies in the domain of science. It's an empirical study. So they have conflicting methods. They have conflicting outcomes or findings. Faith is a poison to science, and it's a virtue in religion. Religion's based on authority, scripture, dogma, all poisons in science, right? So what do you guys think about that? We have a lot of religious scientists and atheistic scientists, and really science in the modern world is an atheistic enterprise. Really,
I wouldn't think you have a lot of religious scientists. There's a great quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson. It says, "I don't want to know why 87% of the Academy are atheists. I want to know why the other 13% aren't."
Yeah.
Yeah. I do agree with that. But I will say, in fairness to that, do you guys know who Kenneth Miller is? Dr. Kenneth Miller? He was recently on
Intelligent Design.
No, he's the he's the guy who, like, back in the 80s or whenever the court case was, he's the guy that destroyed all the creationists with their own science while telling them how much he believed in God as a Catholic in courts. Like, he was the one
I'm not
that.
sure I've heard of him.
So R and Raw recently did a discussion with him, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I definitely didn't know all of the cool things that man had done, but there are.
He was big in the Dover trial, wasn't he?
Thank you. Yes, it was slipping my mind.
Oh, yeah.
And he just, he stood up there and destroyed every single argument, every single ridiculous creationist claim that they had, and then at the end of it, went home and prayed. I mean, because the man does believe in God, but he keeps that outside of the science. And that, I think, is the only acceptable way you can truly believe while being that deep into the understanding of the universe. At that point, if you're, Steven Pinker's level of intelligence and study on stuff, it's almost impossible to be religious unless you just literally leave it at the door. And that's fine for me, because then we still get really good stuff out at the end. But I'd kind of prefer on your way out, while you're walking out of the science, and you got that door open to grab that religious coat, just go ahead and ask yourself a few more questions, I mean, just in the process already.
I think it is a lot of willful ignorance that they know they have to compartmentalize. They just have to shut it down. And one of my friends is not a scientist, but he's a Harvard-trained lawyer. He's a partner in his law firm, and he's an evangelical Christian. And I said, like, okay, you're a smart guy. I mean, how can you believe this? I mean, you would never go before a client and go, well, I didn't do many studies. I just believe. You would have done your homework and your research. And he says, well, there's just different compartments in my brain. And I'm, okay, that's a fair answer.
And especially if it's in America, you can't provide religious experience as evidence. You can't say things like, oh, well, I talked to this witch and she did this pagan ceremony, and then that's how I know about this guy murdering this person. That doesn't work in our courts. So
there's been research done about how smart people are better at rationalizing their own beliefs that they have. But the thing is, if you or somebody has a scientific mind, you should be constantly like questioning, applying a skeptical outlook to things, because that's what works. But
not necessarily the scientists that get me. It's biblical scholars. Like there's a handful that like Bart Ehrman was a Christian. He no longer is. But E.P. Sanders is a Protestant who wrote a book called The Historical Figure of Jesus. And it boggles my imagination. How can you know what you know, teaching this, writing books about this, and still be a Christian? Like even like Albert Schweitzer, who wrote The Quest for the Historical Jesus, which Ehrman says fundamentally redirected the course of New Testament scholarship in the 20th century, was still a Christian. I was like, I don't get it. How can you be a Christian when you know how much of it is bullshit?
Yeah.
It's just
isn't Elaine Pagels and John Dominic Crossan and people like that? They're still Christians, right? But they're very like liberal. You know what I'm talking about? Like
he's a priest or something. He's like, I don't know if he was a priest, but he was something in the Catholic Church. I think I've seen. I follow Candida Moss on Twitter, and she follows me. I don't know why, but she does. And I've seen a couple of posts from her where I think, I mean, even though she's a religious scholar, I think she goes to church and believes, and I'm like, okay, I don't get how you can be a scholar in this topic and still believe it. So.
And
by the way, quick note, I may be getting the biblical scholar I can't pronounce her name, Francesca Stravopaluku. She's a big biblical scholar and an atheist. Look her up on YouTube. She's great. But
that'd be awesome.
Just a note there. I may get her in a month or so. But yeah, Ehrman talks about in seminaries they know about all the critical study of the Bible, but they still believe it. They often don't tell their congregations when they become preachers.
I have that quote in one of my articles where Ehrman says they learn it and they subjugate it. And they
I
don't
have it
talk
in my
about
book too. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, go
I
ahead.
think that all of this, honestly, the last few minutes, I think all of this is, for me, potentially one of the best arguments when it comes to, you don't choose to believe stuff. You don't have that choice. You don't get to wake up tomorrow and eat a cinnamon roll and then go, all right, well, I'll just be Catholic today. I mean, you can do it. You can do it disingenuously. You
You
can
can't choose
always
what you're
just
convinced of, Elliot, but you
right,
can put in
right.
the work to try to interrogate your beliefs if you really care about what's true.
Fair enough, fair enough. But the
No.
motivation for that interrogation doesn't. You don't get to decide to be motivated to question yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what a good bunch of people that speak on determinism talk about. I mean, Cosmic Skeptic has some wonderful stuff on that, where he says, like, look, even if you do decide to question something or don't decide to question something that you hold to be true, it's not your choice. You don't choose to question. You just do question, or you don't. And it's
Right.
the same with, that's why I love street epistemology and Anthony Magnabosco, is because the whole point is actually getting people to think about it. But again, it's not as if they really are choosing to do that. Somebody else is asking them questions that their brain is either then interpreting in a manner that they continue to think about it, or they don't. And that, again, it's a frustrating reality of the world, it seems. But I think what that means is that we do our best to always question stuff as much as we can, whenever, even if we don't want to. It's like, I'm tired of this. I know dinosaurs didn't live with humans. I don't care to hear what you have to say anymore about this. And yet, hear it out. And
I'm amazed by flat earthers. I mean, I can't for the life of me figure them out. I mean, if you're gonna believe that, what you really can believe anything. You're just unreachable.
There's a video on YouTube of a guy that takes a GoPro and straps it to a weather balloon and just lets it go. Like, he did this recently.
Yeah.
And you can just see it at some point.
Guys, getting to the last couple of topics. Abortion. Kind of a light topic.
Yeah. Easy road to end on.
Yeah. But I haven't really touched it on my channel at all. So,
have you guys read Freakonomics?
No,
I've heard of it.
I know of
so
it. Yeah.
In Freakonomics, they talked about the decrease in crime wave and the crime rate during the Clinton years, and this economist was saying it correlates with the passing of Roe versus Wade, so that 18 years after all these unwanted babies weren't born, you see a decrease in the crime wave.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe a lot of the people that are anti-abortion, they have sincere motives. I mean, they really think it's a matter of saving a life, a human life. But the problem is, abortion is such a distinct and unique situation. It's not really comparable to anything, and it's not that simple. If you look at just the way human reproduction works, it's so nebulous, and like you can have like embryos that combine or divide and become like twins, or combine and become a chimera. You have so many, like, women have fertilized eggs that wash out in menstruation. When the natural or spontaneous abortion is like 50% or more. Fertilized eggs, they spontaneously abort. So I mean, I guess God is a big abortionist. And in the Bible, he didn't have a problem with abortion, at all. And in Jewish scripture says, life begins in the first breath. This is such a complicated thing. I think nobody wants to be called anti-life or anti-freedom, right? So I mean, I think I'm pro-life, but I'm taking everything into account. I don't want the government, all the battles that women have had to fight for every last right they have. I don't think it's a better world, the state mandating what they can, controlling their bodily autonomy.
Absolutely. And
it's just too complicated of a.
I think there is a good reason to put a limit, in the sense of, at a certain point, guys, this is not okay. I had a conversation with a friend of mine many years ago where he said, He said, man, look, you always have the right to terminate the pregnancy. And I go, okay, so 8 month, like 22 days. He's like, yep, if the woman doesn't want it at that point, that's okay. Now, I said, hey, man, it's a little much to me. Let me throw this out to you. Because his whole thing was, well, it's connected to the woman. It's hers. It's her body. And I don't disagree with that
They
concept.
can often die too, by the way. I mean, their life can be at risk in so many ways, the women.
Of course. And so let's say bar all of those. There's no rape or incest or other traumatic episode that happened to this person. There's no health risks to the mother or the baby or anything. This is a perfectly healthy mother and a perfectly healthy baby. And I said, hey, man, look, so she has the baby's born, but it's still attached to her on the umbilical cord. Can we terminate it? And he said, man, I don't know. It's a baby. And I said, right. See, so there is a point in human gestation that I think it's unfair for us to not consider this thing basically a person. But that comes way later than what the 22 weeks is, I think, a general time frame that we have for most things. And that's like, that's a good few months in. That's super fair. Like 6 weeks? In Tennessee, they passed this ridiculous fetal heartbeat bill thing. And it's like, wait. That is not a heart. That is not a heart, guys. It is not a child.
Right. And you notice too that a lot of these anti-abortionists, that call themselves pro-life, they care about it before it's born, but after that, they don't care so much, right? And they care so much about that life that's often a little bundle of cells, and they don't care about the woman's life, right?
Yeah.
So kind of hypocrisy.
You're pre-born, you're fine. You're preschool, you're fucked.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've started reading a book. What I'm kind of reading lately is a book called "Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian" by Seth Andrews. And I've never read any books by him, but this book is really, really good. And there's all kinds of info that I didn't know. Politically, with the conservative movement, it's fascinating. So.
And right now, unfortunately, over these last few years, I mean, it's really been we found out it's a coordinated effort for the last decade or so. There is, what's the ALEC, the organization, I think is what it's called, ALEC. I could be wrong on this, but there's a few fairly large, motivated, and well-funded, super hardcore Christian movements right now in this country. And the reason that we're seeing over the last good few years almost identical bills in various state houses, other than just literally the name of the state. It's like, this bill is for Mississippi. This bill is for Alabama. We've just been watching them try to pass these laws in various states, and they're all coming from this one organization. I mean, we at one point, there's some video, I think, I may have seen it on an episode of John Oliver's show like a year or so ago, but I'm pretty sure there's a video in one of these state houses where this guy is presenting this bill, and then he sits down, and then somebody, one of the legislators on the panel goes, hey, so is this bill from this organization? And the guy goes, no, not at all. And he goes, oh, cool, because the email that you sent us about this bill last week, it has their watermark on every single page. And then we went to their website, and it does have the exact same bill. Did you just pull this off their website and just try to present it to us? So that was a successful stopping of the bullshit there, because we called him on it. But even still, there are, like, the Mormon Church is one of the most well-funded institutions in this country, and they don't pay taxes, and they've got a lot of money to throw around whenever they like a bill or dislike a bill, and that has to be pushed back on. That isn't what this country is about. We're not a religious nation. We allow you to have religion, of course, but you don't get to have your religion in our government.
Jason and I did an interview with Andrew Seidel, the constitutional attorney,
I saw
I guess
that.
a couple months ago. You know, he was talking about, you know, the fact that you can't have a government that has religious freedom unless the government is free from religion, because all through history, you know, it's demonstrated for all to see what happens. If
Yeah.
those are, and the American founders, time after time, I mean, they articulated that fact, and obviously the government that they created, definitely. But
He's
and
a
also,
brilliant guy.
yeah, his book is great. I highly recommend it
Yeah.
if you haven't read it. And also he said, you know, talking about, I lost my train of thought.
Government free from religion.
Right. Damn, man, I completely lost my train of thought. It happens. Anything else you guys want to touch on before we start wrapping up? Anything in the news or?
I think we probably could hit a bunch of stuff. I mean, I've watched all the other videos you guys have done together on this channel. I've enjoyed them. I mean, they've always been great discussions, and I feel like the three of us could probably make fun of Trump for hours or make fun of religion for hours. I mean, we could definitely get into some stuff, but I think it was great. I think it was a really great conversation, man. I appreciate you having me on. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being on, and you too, Jason. I think you kind of been on here more than any other guests at this point, I think.
Veteran.
So yeah.
Awesome.
I
appreciate you inviting me in.
Yep. I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream, guys.
Okay.
Yep.